Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Of course, by everybody, I mean you. Yes, of course, you. You're the only one who's ever going to see this video. I made this one just for you, so hopefully you like the deck that I am going over today. This is going to be a really grindy deck that runs Ephemerate in black, white colors and Pauper. I love this card, Ephemerate. I think it is really strong. I think it is a little bit degenerate, especially when it's being run in Tron builds, but we are trying to find other ways to get good value out of this card. So in black white colors, that gives us access to a lot of interesting creatures that have entered the battlefield triggers. Notably, we have Chittering Rats here. Great card to have them put a card from their hand on top of their library. Typically, this is going to amount to them basically skipping their next draw as long as they have a card in their hand. But once we toss Ephemerate into the mix, things start to get a little bit spicy. If we're able to play this out and flicker it the same turn that we play the Chittering Rats, we are going to have them put two cards from their hand on top of their library, and if our opponent is empty-handed, we can put a stop on their draw step, and then we can flicker the Chittering Rats, which, unless they drew an instant that they want to cast right away, we are going to be able to effectively make them skip that draw. They'll have to put it back on top of their deck, and then wait a whole nother turn to try and play it again. So, other creatures that we have to generate value here. Kor Skyfisher is great for picking up the other enter the battlefield triggers. We also are running 5 artifacts that draw a card when they enter the battlefield, so we're going to be able to get some advantage off of that. Of course, the 4th Thraben Inspector is great to pick up with Kor Skyfisher. In a pinch, it is a fine Ephemerate target. Let's say we're using Ephemerate to save one of our creatures from a removal spell. When it rebounds the next turn, if we don't have anything better to do, we can always flicker Thraben Inspector. We can flicker one of our 3 Dusk Legion Zealots. These are going to be able to get us extra card advantage. It's effectively sort of going to turn the Ephemerate into a cantrip. Potentially, if we're blinking 2 cards to draw an extra card, we can draw 2 cards off of it. We can also use Ephemerate as a protection spell, which is very nifty. If they're going to try and Lightning Bolt our Kor Skyfisher, we can Ephemerate it in response, potentially get some value off of it by bouncing one of the artifacts or creatures that draws us an extra card, possibly the Navigator's Compass to gain us 3 extra life, just one of these guys here, because we never really want to see more than 1 in a game, but this is going to help us. We do, with our colors, we do have a couple of lands that are tapping for colorless mana, so this along with the Prophetic Prisms is going to help those to tap for colored mana. We've got the Radiant Fountain here, which is another acceptable thing to pick up with the Kor Skyfisher if we're playing against Burn or if we're just running really low on life in a grindy matchup. So we have some artifacts here to pick up with the Kor Skyfisher. We've got the 4 Prophetic Prisms. We have 1 Spare Supplies, which is functioning sort of like an extra Prophetic Prism that is sort of like a clue. We could just sacrifice it for 2 and draw a card. We are running 1 Glint Hawk. I started out with more in this list, but I have been cutting it down because the artifact count is a little bit low in this deck. We are a lot of times going to be able to pick up one of the draw artifacts or Navigator's Compass with the Glint Hawk, but I do have 2 Ancient Dens in here as well as just something to pick up if we just don't have anything else, because if we don't have an artifact, we cannot get the Glint Hawk into play and have it stay there, because it's just going to get sacrificed unless you return an artifact to your hand. So a couple of the other spicy one-ofs in this deck, we have 1 Tortured Existence. So this card is just a one-of in this deck because, like the Glint Hawk, we don't really want to draw more than 1, even more so with the Tortured Existence, actually, because we don't have any way to filter our card draws. We're not going to be able to discard an extra Tortured Existence. It's just going to sit in our hand if we draw a second one. So there is only 1 in here, which notably is going to improve the quality of our card draws effectively. We're drawing a lot of cards, and we are going to be able to discard the creatures that we don't need to get back creatures that we do need from the graveyard, and this has the added benefit of tricking our opponents into thinking that we are much more of a graveyard-based deck than we are. If we're playing this in game 1, if they see a Tortured Existence, they're probably going to, and probably safely, assume that we are using the graveyard for most of our value here, but that just simply is not the case. We only have the 1 Tortured Existence and the 1 Omen of the Dead. So I'm running Omen of the Dead in lieu of a second Tortured Existence because the second Tortured Existence is basically just completely useless in game 1, and a lot of times we're going to be taking out in game 2 And 3, if we're suspecting that they are going to bring in a lot of graveyard hate, we can just pull the Tortured Existence out. And sometimes the Omen of the Dead will come with it. But this is a card that is another good thing to pick up with Kor Skyfisher. It gives us just more lines of play. If we have an Ephemerate in our hand and a Kor Skyfisher and an Omen of the Dead, we can get extra creatures back from our graveyard to our hand. We can replay them. We can get more triggers. So just one of this card here, because also this is another card that we don't really want to see in multiples in game 1 when we're going into a match blind and we don't know what kind of a deck our opponent's going to be playing on, how much removal they're going to be playing, those sorts of considerations. So other artifacts that the Glint Hawk and can pick up in a pinch is the Bonesplitter. Glint Hawk is also excellent at wearing a Bonesplitter. All of our flying creatures, of which we have the 4 Kor Skyfishers, we have 3 Aven Riftwatchers and 1 Glint Hawk, all get 4 power flying when you pop the Bonesplitter on them. So that will help us close out our games better. The Aven Riftwatcher is an excellent card with Ephemerate. We can get it back from our graveyard with the Tortured Existence or the Omen of the Dead if it dies. Once it gets close to dying with the Vanishing, we can blink it to not only reset its Vanishing counters, but when it leaves, we gain 2, and then when it enters, we also gain 2 as well. So potentially we could be gaining a lot of life off of this card. We could pick it up with the Kor Skyfisher, play it back out. So lots of different lines of play that we can piece together with this deck. We have 2 Thorn of the Black Rose. This is going to be a pretty good deck at protecting the Monarch because we have things on the ground and in the air, and we are getting a lot of value with our other cards. This is a way that we can get some additional value on top of that without having to continuously pay mana into Prophetic Prisms and things like that. So just one of the Okiba-Gang Shinobis. I used to be running 2 of this card, but it is a card that is a little bit awkward in some situations. You're typically not going to want to see 2 of these early in the game, especially if you're not able to hit 4 mana or you're not able to get any creatures to stick on the battlefield. However, the Okiba-Gang Shinobi works really well with the cards that we want to be running with Ephemerate anyway, because if we pick up a creature with an Enter the Battlefield trigger, then we can play it back out after we have ninjutsu'd out into play and get extra value off of those triggers. So for the removal, we have 1 Gurmag Angler here, not particularly a graveyard heavy deck, but I love running 1 Gurmag Anglers in all sorts of lists that run black, and then if we're able to enable more, we will run more, but I love tucking one of these into decks that are running black. If our opponent is destroying our Gurmag Angler, we do have the Omen of the Dead and Tortured Existence to get that back in game 1 to have larger recursive threats. If we need flyers, we could always get those back with the Tortured Existence as well. So as far as the removal of this deck goes, we have 3 cast downs. This is going to be great instant speed interaction that we can pass the turn, and excuse me, if we're leaving up a clue token, we can always choose to crack that at the end of the turn unless we need to cast down it. And then 2 Journey to Nowheres. So I am running this card because it has an interesting kind of corner case interaction with Ephemerate and Kor Skyfisher. If you have a Kor Skyfisher on the battlefield and you have an Ephemerate and a Journey to Nowhere in your hand, what you can do is you can play the Journey to Nowhere, and while the ability is on the stack, you can Ephemerate your Kor Skyfisher, bouncing the Journey to Nowhere back to your hand. So what that's going to do is it's going to put the trigger on the stack to return the creature from exile before the creature is actually exiled. So effectively what we're doing here is permanently exiling a creature from the battlefield. With the first Journey to Nowhere that we cast, we bounce it back to our hand, and then we can potentially play it back, exiling a second creature with it. We're not going to be able to do that as part of the rebound on the Ephemerate, though, notably because Journey to Nowhere does not have flash, and we're not going to be able to play that during our upkeep when it comes back. So this is a really fun deck. It's really grindy, sort of plays like a weird combination between mono black control and Jund and kind of toolboxy, maybe a Trinket Mage-like decks with just the spicy one-ofs. You got some recursion, you've got a lot of different lines of play, so it feels there's definitely a learning curve to this deck, but it feels pretty strong. We're often able to go head-to-head with decks like Jund and Tron in the value that they are getting off of their creatures, and you are going to need to play a little bit quick with this deck if you're going up against a grindy deck and you hit 3 games in a match. They are going to go pretty long, so you are going to want to play quickly. before I get to the sideboard, just a note on another benefit of this deck, which is the rogue element. We are running a deck that our opponent's probably going to have no idea what to make of it after game one. They're going to see cards put together like Chittering Rats or Dusk Legion Zealot and Tortured Existence, and their Ephemerates, and then there's Monarch in here too, so they're just going to have absolutely no idea what we're doing. They're going to think we're completely mad, and they're probably going to bring in a good bit of graveyard and artifact enchantment hate. But that's not actually too bad for us, because they might think that they're going to be killing some high impact artifacts or enchantments, but we can always just pull out the Tortured Existence, and they're probably going to be blowing something up like a Prophetic Prism, or maybe if they get really lucky, they can hit a Bonesplitter or an Ancient Den at a very critical time, but we are just running 2 of those. So our opponent, especially if they see things like Tortured Existence, Journey to Nowhere, some artifacts, they're going to bring in graveyard hate, they're going to bring in enchantment hate, they're going to bring in artifact hate, and we're not particularly concerned about that. So hopefully we can instill some fear into the hearts of our opponents into over sideboarding, which is going to help us out in games 2 and 3. So as far as our sideboard goes here, with the Ephemerates, with the Kor Skyfishers, with the Ninjutsu, the Lone Missionary is a great card to be running. A good card to throw out, turn 2 against burn, just gain 4 extra life. And then we have a 2-power creature that's going to trade with their little goblin, what's that card called? Goblin Lava Runner, maybe? The one that gets haste, 2/2, as long as you have the, I think it's 2 or 3 instants in your graveyard, instants or sorceries. So that's going to trade with some of their creatures, and it's going to gain us 4 life, which can effectively cancel out a Fire Blast or a little bit more than a Lightning Bolt type effect. We have 1 Obsidian Acolyte. This is going to be good at protecting us against our opponent's cast downs. They might bring in other kinds of black removal spells. This is going to be good at protecting us against that. Prismatic Strands is a great card to put in decks that have white in them, because this is going to allow us to gain some extra turns against monocolored decks, against boggles. We could maybe even want to bring this in against burn, because some of the stuff that we're doing is really slow and clunky, like Kor Skyfisher bouncing Prophetic Prism, replaying Prophetic Prism. Like, we don't have time to be doing that when we're facing burn, so we're probably going to even want to bring this in that circumstance. It's going to protect us from other removal spells. Fiery Cannonade's a little bit problematic for us, but it's not too bad because a lot of our creatures don't die to the Cannonade. We've got 2 Patrician Scorn. This is going to destroy our own Journey to Nowheres, but we can... it's just so high impact that if we're playing against a White Heroic deck or a Boggles deck, excuse me, we're going to want to bring this in anyway to get rid of all of their enchantments, and we can potentially take out our Journey to Nowheres if that is going to cause a conflict with a deck like Boggles. We're running 3 Duresses. This is going to be good against counter spells. This is going to be good against really any deck that's running a high concentration of non-creature spells. And we're probably even going to want to pull this in again against burn, because we need to take out some of our Prophetic Prisms. We're probably going to want to take out some of the more high-end cards, maybe some Chittering Rats, and this is going to give us more early game ways to interact with their hand. 2 Chainer's Edict, some sacrifice effects for decks that aren't running a lot of creatures, in addition to our main deck removal that we have. Got 2 Crypt Rats to clean up little weak creatures on the battlefield, good against elves, good against bird tokens, good against goblin tokens. It eats up all sorts of little creatures. 1 Nile Spellbomb. We are running this because it cantrips, it exiles the graveyard. It doesn't touch our graveyard if we do want to leave the Tortured Existence and Omen of the Dead. Maybe might want to be a Relic of Progenitus, but I'm testing this out here. And I finally broke down and bought a Bonder's Ornament, because Tron and Jund have just been going way over my head with this card here. So I've got a whole stack of these cards in paper, paid about $1 for them. This one here cost me 8 tickets, so hopefully you're watching this far in the future when the supply problem for Bonder's Ornament has been solved, and you can laugh at my misfortune for having to pay 8 tickets for a card that really should just be worth like 25 cents at the most. So that's the deck here. It's a lot of fun. It's really grindy, got a lot of value in it, a lot of fun to play. So if this is your style of deck, I would highly recommend giving this deck a try. Got all sorts of different lines of play that can be optimized as you learn the deck better. So I am making maybe a few more changes to this as I've playtested it. I've been playing this in the tournament practice room on Magic Online, and it feels pretty strong. So I wanted to show this deck to you and let you see everything that I have going on here. I'm going to be back for more deck techs. I think next up I might do a couple of some really spicy, janky lists that I'd like some help building because they are not quite working the way that I want them to in their current state, but I think that they could be really fun and maybe there will be a breakthrough. So I hope to catch you in the next video. If you like this video, you can subscribe for more content. You can check out my other videos. I have deck techs, and there are going to be gameplay coming soon, both league and tournament practice. So you can hit that subscribe button, like button if you liked it, dislike button if you didn't like it. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.